All right. I guess I should stand in place so they get the cameras pointed right. No kidding. No kidding. Exactly.
I've got some more swag and the usual trivia questions. These are at least good 10 o'clock ones because they're easy, or at least they look that to me. Close. 43. This one is, what fictional country is Dr. Doom king of? And this is for, yeah. There. Yeah, you got it. Oh my God. Yep. And for the beer cooler, what metal alloy do you get when you combine copper and tin? Titanium. Bronze. Are we ready to go?
Ready when you are.
All right, so the first talk this morning is becoming Jack Flack.
You can say weird in the middle.
All right, thank you very much. Video live.
Yes,
All right, we had to start with a musical interlude. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here so early. Hopefully, most of you guys are actually awake. I'm Taylor Banks.
And I'm Adam Berginzer.
And we are members of Chaos Theory. We are here to talk to you this morning about becoming Jack Flack, essentially real-life cloak and dagger. Before we get too far here into our presentation, we will start with an obligatory disclaimer. A few things we will point out. Number one, neither Adam nor myself are attorneys. If you have any questions about the content in this presentation or any of its legality, please consult one. Number two, nothing in this presentation should be construed as advice. It's just information, right?
Number three, you need to make your own moral and ethical decisions with what you're going to get out of this presentation. We're not here to tell you what's right and wrong. That's up to you. And number four is that we tailored this presentation towards the United States based on what we know and the laws we were able to research. So if you're here from another country, make sure you check out what works in your country.
We also want to point out that our only real qualification here is curiosity. Adam and I obviously have real life, personal, professional, and social lives. We also actually have profiles on Facebook and LinkedIn and such. So, understand again that curiosity is what drove us to producing this presentation. So before we get too far, I think the first question, and probably one of the more important questions, is why be anonymous? What's the point of doing all of this anyway? And while there are a myriad number of reasons, the simple fact is we believe everyone has the right to privacy. Interestingly, you'll find that most, if not all, of the quotes that we've used here in our presentation actually come from U.S. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas, and he was quite a privacy advocate. He's got some real zingers of lines here, and this is one of my favorites, right? The right to be let alone is indeed the beginning, or I would say the cornerstone of all freedom. Further, we also want to point out, and we want to reinforce or really drive home the fact that being anonymous does not mean or imply that you are a lawbreaker, and it shouldn't mean or imply that you are a lawbreaker, only that you do indeed want to be let alone. A couple of things to bear in mind. Number one, this is not really for the faint of heart. The process of becoming anonymous does require intellect, desire, dedication, right? This isn't something you can really do in your spare time or you can halfway commit to. If you want to become anonymous, you want to get rid of your identity, this is pretty much an all or nothing endeavor. The last thing I want to point out here, those who claim you don't need privacy if you have nothing to hide are exactly the people you need to be hiding from.
Yes.
All right.
So next most important question is, who is Jack Flack? Everyone hopefully has seen Cloak and Dagger, the kid from E.T., Dabney Coleman, right? Okay. So using that as our meme here, we've got three levels of becoming anonymous: the cloak, the dagger, and then the hermit level. The cloak level we've established is the minimally anonymous level. Your girlfriend, stalker, favorite fans on the internet, not going to be able to find you. any three-letter agency, any PI, anyone remotely serious is probably still going to figure out who you are and how to get to you. So at the dagger level, you're stepping it up a bit. You're pretty anonymous. It's going to be a more difficult life. You'll see here that we've outlined potentially legal in yellow. Throughout the slides, we've highlighted certain areas as yellow that if you're not careful, you could be breaking the law. So you need to be walking the line here. Find out the right way to do these things or don't do them at all. The FBI, however, is still going to find you at the dagger level. So finally, we've got Hermit. Hermit is completely off the grid, potentially completely invisible. Depending on how dedicated and serious you are to this practice of Hermit level, you could hide from just about anyone. So, Jack Flack 101, the basic premises for any of the three levels. First of all, there's going to be some new habits we're going to introduce to you that are going to be difficult, perhaps, from what you're used to in your daily lives, but we believe that over time, you'll get more comfortable with them. One of the other primary rules is that you need to be careful when communicating with others. What you say and how you talk to them is going to have a big impact. It's important to pay attention to the information that you're communicating to these people and the information they already have. You want to repeat what they know about you. If they know your name, well then you can re-give your name, but don't give anything else out. Also look around. As you walk and pay attention, look for security cameras, look for police or other agencies, anyone who may be out to identify you. You always want to be able to get yourself out of a situation. If you happen to be near a crime or near a situation that can be causing trouble, you want to be able to find an exit and get out so that you are not becoming a part of that scene and becoming identified. Part of that means blending in. Don't stand out. Don't wear overly obvious disguises. Don't be overly flashy in your clothes and your appearance. And lastly, this is an ongoing process that's going to take over throughout the rest of your life. This is not something that you can do once and then forget about and move on.
All right, now again, before we really get into breaking things down into three levels, specifically Cloak, Dagger, and Hermit, there are a few things that, again, you're going to have to do regardless of how anonymous you intend to become. So getting started, essentially, or the early steps towards becoming anonymous. The first thing you're going to have to do is cancel all of that information that's coming at you. So whether we're talking about magazines or newspapers or Netflix or Blockbuster, basically any subscription, anything that is associated with the identity you are trying to obfuscate or that you're trying to get rid of needs to go away. A big part of this process is also forwarding your mail. Your home address, which is what most people give out when you sign up for forms and you sign up for subscriptions, is something you'll probably not want to continue using. There are a number of ways to do this, and we'll get into a little bit more detail as we go through, bearing in mind that in general we're talking about third parties here. So we're talking about, either something along the lines of a mailboxes, etc. at the most basic level, or potentially someone who will be receiving mail on your behalf. We're going to need to expunge any and all legal and credit histories. Bear in mind that some of this information, there are legal precedents for information going away, right? On your credit history, technically things older than 7 years, you can request removal, and by law, the individual credit bureaus will remove this information. Newer information you may have to contest or fight to have it removed. In some cases, you are at the mercy of the American Gestapo, the credit bureaus who hold and or possess this information. So understand that, again, you've only really got so much you can do to expunge this information. Also bear in mind that after having done so, you'll probably want to place locks on your credit files in order to prevent new information from accumulating on the identity that you are trying to get rid of. Lastly, we want to shred everything. Now, there are various degrees of security for shredding information. In essence, our goal here is to say, hey, shred everything on paper. And we would say, in order to truly be secure, you should shred everything with a level 3 or higher shredder, which is basically going to end up with 1/8-inch cross-cut squares of tiny confetti paper, right? We want to ensure that no one's going to be able to take the information that we shred and put it back together after the fact.
Right, and as another note, you don't just want to shred everything and then dump that in your trash and put it outside your front house. You're going to want to take that, split it up into smaller chunks, and mix in some junk mail with your confidential information, and then throw that out over time so that if anyone is picking up your trash and they try to reassemble what they get, they're not getting a whole piece of anything.
Absolutely. Now, we have to go through the same process online. Question? The question was, couldn't you just burn it? The answer is yes, although technically you wouldn't want to burn the information without first shredding it, because a burned piece of paper is basically as easy to put back together for at least organizations that have the time and money as a piece of paper that is not cut with a crosscut shredder. So burning it alone is not good enough. Shredding it and burning it would be ideal.
Yeah, you can chemically reassemble burned paper pretty easily.
Absolutely. Again, we're going to go through the same process online. So what we've done with our real-life subscriptions, our magazines, our newspapers, our books, our Blockbusters, and Netflixes, we also want to do with any identities we've established online. So this is MySpace, Friendster, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it, really. Any profile that you've created for any service needs to go away. If you've got the ability to destroy or remove it, you should do so, or you should at least request its removal. In many cases, you can't really know whether or not the organizations that possess this information will get rid of it. We also make a note here about cleaning up search history, and we don't just mean your browser search history. We mean going to sites like Google and Yahoo, and where possible, again, essentially selecting the option to clean up the information that they've collected about the searches that you've conducted. Now, this isn't really enough. We take two approaches now to moving forward and becoming anonymous. The first approach is what we're going to call nothing in the cloud. The idea being, as you take on a new identity and as you become anonymous, you're going to host and own all of your own data and all of your own infrastructure. So this means whether you're co-locating or whether you're carrying a shuttle form factor PC with your own mail server via dynamic IPs around with you, the idea is that we keep all of our information within our control. I will place emphasis on the fact that the only acceptable solution here is still to encrypt everything. Of course, the second approach is the absolute inverse of this, and that is host nothing, or everything in the cloud. Right? The idea being, own no data that can incriminate you or identify you. So you don't own your infrastructure, you don't own your information. Instead, you put all of your information online, and you use strictly cloud-based services. But again, I will emphasize, you'll note the same bullet point, you must encrypt everything. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about encryption as we make our way through the presentation. One of the things to bear in mind is encryption is both good and bad when we're talking about privacy. And we'll make some differentiations, and we'll point out kind of the hows and whys as we get there. Lastly, you're going to want to format and reinstall all of your own machines. You're going to want to create any and all new accounts for those services that you must have. Now, as we make our way through these multiple levels, you're going to learn that in many cases, we are going to suggest avoiding the internet when possible, right? The internet is an extraordinary tracking mechanism for those with time, money, and resources, and the more you participate, the more likely you are going to be to create tracks. Myself, I went for the route of hosting everything on my own. I actually have transdermal microSD implants behind the keyboard tattooed on my arm. Right, so that said, all right, we move now into part one. Part one is the cloak level of anonymity, and Adam, I turn it back over to you.
All right. Okay, so step one. First important thing is to actually become anonymous. It's important to at least make up a new name, right? We may not legally change it, but at least come up with a new name to start using on a regular basis. And your new name should be clever in that your name should consist of names, individual names, that can be used well as first and last names. One example here is James Wilson Martin Lawrence. So as James Wilson Martin Lawrence, you can identify yourself as James Martin, Wilson Lawrence, Wilson Martin, James Lawrence, Martin Wilson. You've got a lot of combinations, and if that's your legal name, all of those can be used appropriately in your real life and present yourself as different IDs. You want to come up with an alternative ID. Now you'll see here we have it yellow. We're not at this point at all talking about a government ID. We're talking about a picture ID that is not official. But you can use it in general purpose throughout your life. Disposable email addresses is going to be the way to go for an online identity. Dodge It and Gorilla Mail are the first steps. They're the best way to go because basically you can give anyone an email address at that domain and then go to the website and they post all the mail they receive from any email address on their domain. So while it's not private at all, it's completely anonymous. If you need to go the Gmail or Yahoo route and establish a more permanent email address, that's okay, but be careful and realize that as a stateful service that you're logging into, you are establishing a sense of identity online. Mailbox rentals, mailboxes, etc., or a friend as a third-party address that will re-forward your mail to you is a great way to go. You can also use a scanned mail service, which will accept your postal mail online and then post it as images, and you can let them know which to scan and open and then redisplay over the internet. The advantage there is you don't have to physically pick up your mail, so you don't have to worry about being identified in person, but someone is opening and reading your mail as they scan it. So there's a privacy issue.
And this is why we make the distinction here. As Adam said before, there are things that we describe as anonymous but not private, and in the converse, private but not anonymous. Oftentimes the two work closely together. In many cases, though, they are at cross purposes here as we go through these steps.
And this is one of those lines that you're going to have to walk as you determine what's more important, your privacy or anonymity. Next thing is you're going to have to find a place to live, right? So single room occupancy is great because someone else has got their name on the property, someone else is paying the utilities, and you're paying them cash. So you effectively have no real identity at that location. You can pick up and vanish at any point in time and move on to another one. Other alternatives are an unregistered RV that you park somewhere. It does not have to be licensed or registered, and you can just live on the property if you're able to find a property. You can also look at kibbutz, which is an Israel commune or a nudist colony. Any of these approaches would work fairly well. Just make sure you don't drink the Kool-Aid, right?
And use suntan lotion.
Yes, indeed. All right, so making money at the cloak level affords us a number of opportunities, not the least of which is, of course, the world's oldest profession. Bearing in mind that we've got other options here as well, the distinction here, or the emphasis being placed on jobs that pay cash, right? The easiest way to begin the process of becoming anonymous, and here at the cloak level, we're kind of sticking strictly to a cash basis. We want to do things that are in fact or indeed cash transactions. So day labor, working in the service industry, and some of these things, you know, there's a fine line. You may or may not be able to work for cash even within the service industry. Now, one thing we want to point out is that by telling you to work for jobs that pay cash, we're not necessarily advocating that you don't pay your taxes, right? We want you to pay your taxes.
We love the IRS just as much as everyone else.
That's right. So bear in mind that there are also opportunities as well here for short-term transactions like graphics and web design. And short of all that, if you can't find anything else to do, there's always porn. We had to work really hard to find porn that was safe for all audiences, so we thought we did a pretty good job here. All right, using money at the cloak level provides us equal opportunities here to stick to a cash use basis. So we're going to try to stick to using cash when making transactions. This means theoretically things like money orders are probably acceptable as well. You can purchase these over the counter at the customer service desk of most drugstores, convenience stores, or grocery stores. We can also now get things like these value stored gift cards, right? You go in and you put up to $500 on what appears to be a Visa card, but in essence it's kind of like a short-term use account. In essence, you're paying for a gift card, but you can use it as a MasterCard or a Visa card if you need to, for instance, perform online transactions. We talk about check cashing services, classifieds, cash auctions. Classifieds are great. Cash auctions, this could include eBay as long as we're not using something like PayPal, because at the cloak level, we are assuming the lack of a bank account. Again, we're sticking here to cash that you maintain in your own possession. Check cashing services are probably acceptable, so if you need to accept checks, you can, bearing in mind that you'll generally pay a rather significant fee to allow a check cashing service to cash your checks rather than going directly to the bank. But as most of you know, banks now have new legal requirements for providing identity when you're cashing checks. In fact, I know Bank of America, if you are not an account holder, at least up until recently, and this is probably still true, required a thumbprint to go cash a check written to you by someone who has a Bank of America account. And that's rather significant just to cash a check. We talk about digital money, or we make references here to digital money. There are not as many options here today as there used to be. It seems that with the dot-bomb, a lot of the e-cash type services went away. Amongst those that remain, eGold kind of still stands near the top, but you may or may not have the opportunity to use eGold. In other words, eGold may not be a real valid option at the places where you are intending to make transactions. And then finally, of course, get yourself a sugar daddy or a sugar mama and let somebody else pay for all of your stuff.
And one of the things that's important at the money level, at all three of these levels, is you're going to notice that in an attempt to become anonymous, you will essentially start paying more for the goods and services you're looking for. It's an unfortunate trade-off that we see no way around, and it's something you'll need to take into account in terms of how much money you're going to need to live. So moving on to transportation. You still have to get around, right? So public bus, trains, metro, those are still good options. Yes, they have surveillance. Yes, there is, again, a privacy and anonymity trade-off, but you can pay cash and you can get where you need to get. A cab, similarly, or a gypsy cab. Greyhound is, from what we can tell, the only longer distance transit option. As of this point, they still accept cash. We're not sure how long that's going to change. They have indicated plans to start requiring ID, but they haven't enforced it yet. There are a lot of people who claim that they are starting to do security checkpoints, but they're easy to get around. You can wait for the next bus. You can get out of line and avoid them, and it's something you'll need to be aware of. But so far, we're still going to recommend it. Carpool or rideshare or working through a community, if you're living in one, is another way to go. And then lastly, the best way to be an independent traveler is to use anything that doesn't require a registration. A 50cc scooter or less can be used just by purchasing it, or a bicycle, anything like that works well. The next step is being aware of all the tracking that goes along in your daily life. From your iPhone, your Google phone, your Samsung phone, whatever you've got, it's going to have GPS and Bluetooth. You need to leave those disabled. They can be used to track you. It's best to turn the cell phone off entirely if you're not expecting a call or using it, since the cell network can be used to track you. Wi-Fi works the same way. People can track you through that. It's also a good reason for you to make sure that your security is tight on all of your devices. If a hacker is able to gain entrance to your devices, they can use that to follow you around. And then RFID is everywhere. You need to have an RFID zapper and zap everything you get. Don't assume that your clothes, just because their clothes are safe. RFID is being used for everything, and you need to have an RFID purse, wallet, jacket pocket, something that is shielded so that if you do make a purchase of goods, you can leave it in there until you get home and can zap it.
Good place to stop for a momentary giveaway.
You want to do that?
Talking about RFID.
Sure.
All right, so while we're on the topic of RFID shielding, so we actually have a giveaway here, and while speaking of unobtainium, these are actually no longer available. These were swag at last year's Shmoo. So this is an RFID blocking passport wallet, nicely labeled with Shmoo on the front of the wallet. So for a RFID blocking passport wallet, the question we have, does anybody here know, or were you able to determine through one means or another, how many surveillance cameras there are in this hotel?
In the entirety of the hotel. Is anyone either paying attention enough or has tried to ask a security guard?
Would you like to say something, Ducky?
0.
All right, so nobody's jumping at the opportunity, so we have kind of a part 2 then, and hopefully someone will have picked up on this then. Not knowing the full number of cameras, and we'll tell you that number in just a moment, does anybody know how many visible security cameras there are in the lobby of this hotel alone? Now, this is something that you could have picked up just by, again, having situational awareness, walking into the hotel, looking around, and saying, how many cameras do I see that can see me?
You have a...
I saw this hand over here in the corner, I think, first.
0.
You right there?
There are, in fact, 8.
Correct.
So you got it. That was
Excellent.
what we saw. There are 8 visible security cameras.
Good job.
8.
And through a little social engineering, we were able to find out on accident that they are claiming that there are 87 security cameras throughout the entire hotel.
We spoke with the security guard and we said, hey, can you confirm or deny that there are only 8 security cameras here in the lobby of the hotel? And he said, absolutely not. I can't tell you how many there are here in the lobby. There are 87 in the hotel, but I can't really tell you much more than that.
And then later he said, well, there's almost 100.
All right.
Okay,
so we now talk about communications here at the cloak level. So how are we going to begin to communicate with people now that we are becoming anonymous? We're looking here at the most basic, or kind of the protocol level, if you will. So from a telecom perspective, we're going to recommend the use of payphones or burners. If you're not familiar with the term burners, you really need to watch The Wire. Burners are basically these prepaid cell phones you can go pick up, again, at convenience stores. If you watch too much Law and Order, you'll hear the cops say, oh, they're completely untraceable and untrackable. Not true. However, they are certainly more difficult to trace and track than a cell phone for which you have a contract. So again, these are basically disposable devices. You go pick one up. It's got a set number of minutes. You use the minutes that come with the phone. You toss it after you're done and pick up another one. Now again, as Adam pointed out, this is certainly more costly than having a $29.99 all-you-can-eat cell phone plan from your local provider. You're going to pay, a cash price on these phones, and by throwing them away, we're expecting you to get a new one every week or month or whatever duration of time you need. So we know this is more expensive. We're ignoring the cost factor here and focusing instead on anonymity alone. When we talk about getting on the internet, again, at the protocol level, we're going to suggest that you use email lightly. Bear in mind, email is a stateful service. It is designed for communication between specific parties. Now, that's not to say that there aren't still some anonymous remailers out there, but for the most part, we're going to suggest light use of email. You could theoretically use something like IRC. We also want to draw your attention to the fact that because of the close relationship between IRC and botnets, at least in modern usage, there's a lot more attention paid to IRC than there has been in the past, whether by law enforcement or even just by security professionals like ourselves who are out trying to shut down botnets. The fact remains, IRC is now a place where you might stand out as much as you might blend in. Question?
Yes, what are your thoughts on the prepaid pagers? You can buy lifetime pagers for $100, so it's one-way communications, but...
So to repeat the question was, what do we think about the prepaid pagers, which are much like the burner cell phones, but you basically, again, pick these up prepaid? And the honest answer to that question, unless you want to add anything out of it, is we haven't really considered it. I would speculate that they are probably of equal value, although...
So the basic premise we approach with communications in general is, A, if you can obtain it without providing any form of identification and paying only in cash, then that's an acceptable first start. So if that applies to these, then that's great.
Right.
And then 2, anything that you use for an extended period of time begins to build an identity. So you're going to want to toss that and get another one of these pagers after about 6 months to a year or whenever you feel uncomfortable.
Right, prepaid or not.
Yes.
Give it to you.
The other observation is what network it's on. So with the,
Right.
with the tossable phones, generally they're on cellular networks that are available throughout the country.
Sure.
So the problem with pager networks is they're generally not. They're regional.
So to repeat that, what he was saying is you have to bear in mind that with the prepaid cell phones, these are generally on GSM or CDMA band, and therefore they are across the country or available and usable throughout the country, whereas the pagers are more likely to be regional. So for 2 reasons. Number 1, again, that might limit your ability to use them, but that might also narrow down where you are potentially using them from. So take that into consideration. And great questions and great follow-up as well.
And another thought, too, from a privacy perspective is we saw recently at the Hackerspace in Atlanta that these two-way pagers use an unencrypted form of communication that is very, very easy to drop in and listen to. So you want to be aware of that with those types of systems.
All right,
and
the last
if you've
one-
been watching GSM, I guess the
Oh, yeah.
GSM talks, I guess really the same thing applies to the phone.
If you guys saw Chris Padgett's talk, that was phenomenal and
Excellent.
lots of fun, right? He was talking about GSM and the just massive failures with GSM crypto, and before he even got to the crypto, he pointed out that they didn't really have to attack the crypto in GSM in order to really take advantage of the phones and networks. So if you haven't seen Chris Padgett's talk, I highly suggest you go pick up a copy of the video. It was outstanding and highly relevant to this topic.
All right, last thing before we move on, I promise. But
Yep.
this is also very important in regards to long-distance prepaid cards, and this applies to anything else that you obtain that has an account number. If you're going to keep that card in your wallet, and then someone is going to be able to get your wallet, they can get that account and then look at every number you've dialed, right? So A, you're going to want to destroy the original copy of that account number, and then B, you're going to want to write that down in an encrypted fashion on a piece of paper that you put in your wallet. If you use a simple Caesar cipher or something real basic like add a fixed number to every number, that's good. But if you're more math inclined, a more complicated cipher method would be better to store those account numbers so that if someone obtains your wallet, they can't know immediately, oh, that's an Alltel long distance card. Let's go find out every number he's dialed in the last 6 months.
The last reference we make on this slide under the header of encryption is for off the record. Off the record is a specific mechanism that is used most commonly with either instant messaging or IRC. The premise behind off the record is a means of providing encrypted communications with plausible deniability. What off the record aims to do is eliminate the use of any digital signatures or any identifying data that could conclusively prove or that would provide non-repudiation that you participated in a certain conversation. So if you want to have encrypted communications via instant messenger, but you don't want to be able to be identified as one of the parties in that communications, using off the record can help to alleviate, again, some of the potential for being tracked by those very communications or conversations themselves. All right, getting online at the cloak level, again, we're going to talk now about some of the things that you can do to get online. Obviously, in getting online, you're going to want to aim to use public kiosks or free and local Wi-Fi. The preponderance of free and local Wi-Fi now means you can pretty much go anywhere, at least in Georgia, and I don't know about everywhere, but, Crystals now has free Wi-Fi. Crystals is like little miniature burgers, I guess White Castle for those of you on the West Coast. Same idea, right? They got free Wi-Fi at McDonald's. They've got Wi-Fi at Starbucks and pretty much everywhere you go. So bear in mind, again, there are lots of places where we can go and get public Wi-Fi for short-term use of the internet. You're going to want to use a live CD. This will be important to, again, prevent yourself from storing information or gathering and creating information about what you're doing and where you're doing it. And when possible, you're going to want to use anonymity mechanisms like Tor and or anonymizing proxies. Not just web proxies, but really any proxies you can find that will help to mask or obscure your tracks and or your destinations. You'll want to enable safe browsing, and although this may be unnecessary if you are in fact using Tor and anonymizing proxies, we're going to kind of go for an anonymity in depth here, right? The more layers that we can provide of anonymity, the better off we are, and the more we avoid any one piece of information being used to identify who we are and what we've done. And furthermore, we also want to recommend mechanisms for anonymous searching. On Worldwide Privacy Day, which was the 28th of January, wasn't really highly publicized, at least not here in the U.S., a new search service called startpage.com was introduced. Theoretically, they store no information about any searches that are conducted, including IP addresses of those conducting the searches. You'll also note that Moxie recently released a mechanism called Google sharing, which basically serves as a series of public proxies through which your Google searches can be conducted in order to, again, avoid Google tracking the information about the searches that you actually perform.
Or the NSA.
Or the NSA. Of course,
Yes.
The funny thing here is we didn't provide a lot of detail about StartPage and Google sharing simply because we've got a lot of information to cover. So if you want more information, Google it. Lastly, of course, there are plugins that also help with anonymity, like Customize Google. This is actually just a Firefox extension, but it will do things like anonymize UUIDs and prevent storage of cookies. It will enable SSL for all Google services that you are interacting with.
Okay, so now we step it up to the dagger level. First, again, is becoming anonymous. But at the dagger level, things get a little more intense. You definitely need to change your name, and you definitely need to use the same guidelines we outlined at the cloak level, picking a smart name that you can be more creative with. This is going to become essential at this level to have a name that you can use differently. A new driver's license and social security number, if you can obtain them illegally, that's excellent and the best way to go. But you need to make sure that you're following the legal lines here. And if you're going to get a new driver's license, go ahead and get it in a different state, right? You're going to want to form several LLCs, and you're going to want to have them on hand, available. Form them in advance. Don't form them the minute you need them. You can use them to own property. You can use them to lightly conduct some business that we're going to get to in a minute. You need to be aware that obviously they're not impenetrable, but one of the advantages an LLC provides is if you incorporate them in the right states, which from our understanding is perhaps Wyoming and New Mexico, then you can not only incorporate them without the LLC portion on the end or the Corp or Inc. portion on the end of it so that it appears like a real name owning something, but also you don't need to list the owners of the LLC on paper. You only need to list a registrar who receives mail for your corporation.
Now let me quickly add, actually, if you have an existing C Corp or S Corp, you can accomplish something similar, at least in many localities, through the use of what we refer to as trade names. A trade name is much like a DBA without the more stringent requirements. They're relatively easy and inexpensive to obtain. And again, a trade name has no requirement for an Inc. or Corp. or LLC at the end. So your trade name could be John Doe.
Right, and while you can do your own research and see, you want to make sure that if you're going to establish a corp versus an LLC, that you're able to do it without having to list the owners of the corporation, because then you're exposing yourself. Yes?
In most states, when you register a trade name, you have to publish in a newspaper the trade name and who is getting the names, creating a web
So you're creating the same link back.
To repeat what he said in most states, again, you will have to potentially publish in a local or community paper when you establish a trade name. This is also often true when incorporating.
Yes.
Interestingly, so in Georgia, for instance, there is a requirement for publishing in the local paper when you incorporate, but not when you establish the trade name. So you will have that initial track having incorporated or created the LLC. However, once you have gone and then established the trade name, there is no secondary requirement for posting when you do the trade name. But again, it's a very important point, and you'll want to look into that before you walk down to the local county office and go trying to create your trade name.
And this is the first time where we open up an advantage we found with actually going towards the Dagger level, which is that by opening up the opportunity for creating corporations and using your alternative identifications, you can actually conduct more business and have more options, such as potentially owning some property through your corporations and LLCs not tied to you. This is something that we don't feel is workable at the cloak level because of the amount of effort involved. Again, the same basic rules apply with email, except Dodge It and Gorilla Mail is pretty much your only option for true personal communication, while Gmail and Yahoo is acceptable for your corporations on the short-term basis. For the shelter level, we're looking at a more mobile lifestyle than at the cloak level. A houseboat or a weekly rental is one way to go, but really trying to be as mobile as possible is the best way, because the more you move, the harder you are to track. Couch surfing and hostels, anything where you can pay cash or not need to pay at all. Shelters, or even the more extreme public parks and squatting are other potential possibilities here.
All right, now social interaction at the Dagger level is going to require a little bit of additional effort in order to ensure that you are not recognizable. So we talk about using disguises in public, and you can go extreme like Mr. Centaur. Or you might just consider like changes to your hairstyle or wearing glasses out in public. I'd actually hoped that I could read my slides like this, but that's simply not going to happen. Right, so again, we also want to do things like avoid long-term communities. Now, this could be really any community, and we also want to point out that this would include, for instance, religious groups. Anywhere where you're going to hang out for any long term is going to create or establish a profile. So that means you're going to want to avoid interactions in any communities that, again, where people are going to begin to recognize and or identify you. We talk about using a proxy, and we had originally just referenced virtual assistants. However, we point out proxy because this is a step beyond. Much like a virtual assistant, this is somebody that can do things on your behalf, but more importantly, they can do things on your behalf and in some cases in their own name, right? And that's kind of the key here. You think about a proxy, there's never really any direct connection between point A and point C, only A to B and B to C. So it does remove you one level from any and all transactions. We want to avoid people in all social networking when possible, and of course it's pretty explicit here that we need to avoid all publicity. Any publicity is going to defeat or mitigate the mechanisms that we're implementing in order to try to become and remain anonymous.
And it's important to note the distinction there between using a proxy, which implies someone you can trust, and trying to avoid people. You're going to have to walk that line again and make sure that this is someone you can trust if they're going to open a bank account in their name or purchase property for you in their name, and make sure you feel like you can actually trust them in some way.
Sure. Making money online, again, we've got some restrictions here, but as Adam pointed out a little bit earlier, because we will potentially have a corporation or an entity through which we can now conduct business, in addition to basic jobs that pay cash, we're now also afforded the ability to do things with our business that would be considered short-term or business-to-business transactions, or short-term business-to-consumer transactions with relatively low expectations. And what we mean by that are short-term services, watch repair, leather repair, car stereo installation, things where you're not going to expect somebody to have to turn around and call you back a week later based on having patched a hole in the leather in their automobile. We talk here about confidence schemes, and what we're really talking here are things like white van schemes, Brian, three-card Monty Popham. There's a lot of things that we can do here, but we're not really talking about breaking the law again. We're talking about doing things that are, again, potentially short-term manipulation of people in order to produce cash on an individual transaction basis.
That's you.
Yes, okay, so using money at the Dagger level, again, we also go now into some of the things we can do in order to keep, maintain, and or transact with our money. So we now introduce concept here of PayPal Corporate, right? We can use PayPal through our organization. Also bear in mind, I was having a conversation with a couple of folks from Georgia who I don't see in the room. yell at them later. But they were pointing out that, again, with a PayPal account, although theoretically you can't deposit money into an unverified PayPal account, you can essentially transfer money from other PayPal accounts into an unverified PayPal account, mitigating or eliminating the requirement for a bank account. So we really don't get into PayPal at the cloak level, again, because of the difficulty and or the potential for requirements. However, at the Dagger level, this is a bit more appropriate. Again, money orders, cashier's checks now potentially, because again, we may have a bank account. We introduced the possibility of offshore accounts, noting that again, much like IRC, offshore accounts are something that are generally going to garner attention. Right? If you've got offshore accounts, somebody's going to begin to wonder why. And if somebody's looking for you, the fact that you've got an offshore account or the fact that there is an offshore account potentially associated with your name could be a bit of a red flag. There is also the concept of a hawala. A hawala is essentially a private network that trades in debt. And what that means is essentially party A pays a member of the hawala, and the member of the hawala basically reaches out to somebody else and says, hey, listen, you need to go pay party B X dollars. Now, there is no money actually transacted between member 1 and member 2 of this private community. They are merely trading in debt, the expectation being that they will later settle up any of the debt that has been created. The interesting thing about this is because no money is actually transacted, this is an extremely anonymous way to make transactions. Of course, finally, there's also good old Tony, and you'll have to pardon us, the volume is kind of low here.
And besides, with a bank, there's always tons of forms to be filled and all that shit. With old Tony, nothing to read, nothing to write.
Nothing to read, nothing to write. All right, so volume was a bit low. Hopefully you guys have all seen The Professional as well. If not, bear in mind you've got homework, right? You got to go out and watch Cloak and Dagger, and you got to go out and watch The Professional.
Okay, so now we get back to travel. You want to travel in disguise, and you want to wear hats, glasses, change your appearance, keep another form of appearance with you so you can continue to change in public if you need to. You're going to want to be very, very aware of camera location, security, surveillance. You want to avoid mass transit as much as possible, not entirely necessarily, but there's a lot of surveillance in mass transit, and you need to be aware of that. Again, unregistered vehicles at this point is our primary recommendation for travel. Greyhound will still work here, of course. However, an unregistered car, if you're careful. And then lastly, we've got the concept of a throwaway car. You have a 30-day lag on the requirement to register a vehicle in the U.S. So you can purchase a car, like a $300, $400 throwaway car, use it after 30 days, toss it, abandon it, and buy another one. Obviously a very expensive way to travel, but comparable to a $340 car lease. Rental car in case of emergencies is another option, but you need to be very, very aware of how much you're going to be identified. This needs to be an emergency getaway option only.
Why not register a vehicle with a New Mexico LLC? Because most states, at least many states, don't require SSNs, and there are states that don't. And the other thing you could also potentially do is get a 30-day tag with an RV and then go park it somewhere.
Right, that's a good point. We did talk about it at the cloak level. Yeah, but his second good point is registering a vehicle through your LLC, and as long as you don't have to give away a driver's license or ID.
Good point.
Thank you. So tracking. Here we say no GPS hardware, right? You cannot own your iPhone, you can't have a Google phone, a GPS device at all. There's no assumption to be made that just because you hit the disable button in your software that they didn't actually re-enable it and start tracking you. If there is hardware for tracking in the device, don't own it. You need to keep your cell phone off.
A lot of phones now, if you have GPS disabled, you call 911 for whatever reason, they will turn it on.
Perfect example. So if you're going to call 911, the phone will turn GPS on for you.
They'll be able to triangulate your general area anyways, even if you just have a cell phone.
Which is exactly the
Absolutely
second
correct.
point. You need to leave the cell phone off at all times except when making a call, and then turn it back off. And again, with a burner cell phone, you're going to be cycling through these phones on a fairly regular basis, so you don't. Hopefully, you're not going to be. People are not going to know your current phone number. Disabling Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 3G, 4G, whatever, same exact purposes. Miscellaneous electronic devices gets back to the concept, if you don't know the hardware that's in it, then don't own it. You need to be very confident that it does not have some sort of tracking device in it. RFID tag rule, same applies at the cloak level, just apply it here too. And then if you're still feeling paranoid, you can put on the tinfoil hat. Telecom. So communications, we open up a couple of different options because of higher technical expectation at the Dagger level. VoIP is a good way to communicate with Z-Phone layered on top of it. You can either do the hosted or build your own routes with the VoIP. If you've got a friend's pre-BX, you can freak through it and bounce your calls around, right? For those of us who remember the Captain Crunch whistle. Usenet, IRC, make sure you're using off the record all the time. And then again, here we talk about encryption. Basically, you've got Z-Phone off the record. You can store your information in Stego and then post it on 4chan, right?
Also bear in mind that freaking your friends' PBXs may make them not your friends anymore.
But last point here on encryption is that something like PGP, anything using a PKI infrastructure that doesn't use it in a way that Z-Phone does, builds an identity and is a form of non-repudiation against your communication. So you want to stay away. You want to look at cipher, block encryption type of encryption.
Unless you're willing to build and throw away keys for every transaction, right? That's
Right.
if you're going to do public key crypto, you're going to need to generate and throw away or create very temporal keys in order to ensure that the keys themselves don't become identifying tokens.
Which is basically really complex cipher.
All right. Getting online at the Dagger level, again, here we're going to look at things like hotel lobbies, restaurants, free Wi-Fi. There's potential for use of prepaid SIMs for data purposes. You could even theoretically take apart a burner phone and rip the SIM out of that phone. In most cases, the prepaid SIMs are actually valid for data service. The cell phone providers simply don't tell you that, right? You can go and travel, you pick up a $20 pre-stored value SIM, you pop it into a little data card in your laptop, and you'll find you can get online, whether via 2G or 3G services provided by that same provider. If you're going to carry a laptop or a computer, something along the lines of something small and easy to get rid of or destroy, a la a netbook, is a good idea. You'll probably want to use something like PGP, WDE, whole disk encryption, or TrueCrypt to do encryption of the entire drive or SSD stored within that device in order to ensure that the data on that device is not easily retrieved and or recognizable. Further, again, at this level, we are going to require the use of Tor and proxies, right? You're not going to be able to get away with making these optional. You're going to have to use them in order to ensure the level of privacy or anonymity you're looking for.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can people track you through your gamer accounts, like for the PS3 and stuff?
So the question was, can people track you through your gamer accounts, for instance, for the PS3, et cetera? And the answer is absolutely. Right? This is, again, it's a service that is hosted by someone else, and the accounts you create, it's information that you're storing about yourself, and depending on the nature of the device and how much they publicize, there may or may not even really be knowledge of how much information they store, right? Are they watching the games you play? Are they watching how much time you spend playing the games? Again, it's dependent on the individual service and or the console that you're using, but the short answer to that is absolutely.
Yes.
Actually, encrypted drives are no longer valid because you can break into the grub part and just take out the stuff that encrypts the drive and still look at it.
All right, so the point was made that encrypted drives are not really as valid because theoretically you could strip the drive and basically take out the components that provide for the encryption. Let's say that whole disk encryption is not necessarily foolproof. However, it is still generally going to be much better when trying to protect your anonymity than carrying around an unencrypted laptop. So there are certainly degrees here of privacy and or anonymity that will be obtained. I see two hands.
Due to the use of wear leveling and such for SSDs, if you're really this paranoid, I'd recommend you actually use real physical platters because you can't tell where your data lives on an SSD, and they can disable wear level segments and still has data in there. So you can wipe the SSD and there's still your data on it.
I think I saw that in Scott Moulton's talk. Awesome.
Quickly in the back.
You're gonna call bullshit on him.
Okay. At any rate, encrypt it. It's not foolproof. TrueCrypt or software encryption is another option that at least I'm not aware of as being able to be broken, and they also incorporate plausible deniability. Okay, now we're at the hermit level, right? The most extreme. No ID. You don't want an ID, right? You don't want fingerprints. Glue them up, make new ones, burn them off, cut up all your cards, get rid of all your services, sell everything you own, terminate all your contracts, distance yourself from your family and friends, and then fake your own death. Live in a cave while you're at it.
All right. Making money at the hermit level, again, we've got a few opportunities here. We can do all of those same things before that we've done for cash. We also talk here a little bit about things like panhandling or potentially hooking. Street performers and carnies are possibilities here, right? Short term, again, transients, if you will. Of course, optimally, we'd not work. And or if you don't smoke too much pot, you can sell your blood, urine, semen, plasma, right? Whatever you got. Kidneys, livers. All right, using money at the hermit level, again, we're gonna stick pretty much to cash when possible. Bartering is also a possibility here via, say, flea markets, Craigslist, classifieds. Here's our guy trading a chicken. Free cycling is a possibility. Also, we're going to recommend self-sustainment, and quite honestly, we really wanted to go into more detail about truly getting off the grid and doing alternative energy, but given the time factor, we really just can't do the topic justice. So you guys want to get into V2.0 of this talk. Maybe next year we'll talk more about self-sustainment and living on your own means.
All right, we're going to try and speed it up here. We're running out of time. So travel, you walk, you bicycle, still Greyhound actually so far. Be a stowaway or don't travel. And again, why are you not traveling? Because you live in a cave. Getting online. Payphones and burners is about it, or communicating, sorry. Payphones and burners is about it. If you're going to get on the internet, don't do it often. You're not owning a laptop, and you're going, we'll cover that in a second. Again, always encrypt off the record or Stego, because Z-phone or other types of phone-based communications are not going to work well with a payphone. And you're pretty much limited, but at this point, you shouldn't really want to talk to a lot of people anymore.
All right, getting online at the hermit level, again, we're going to talk here about public kiosks only. The assumption now is you're not carrying any hardware. At the hermit level, you're not going to own a device that can be used or tied back to you physically or individually, so we're talking almost strictly about kiosks and or public devices providing internet. Again, strong requirement for Tor and proxies here, although this may be hard on kiosks. So one thing we'll mention additionally is you might consider using the cloud, if you will, to store portable binaries of those mechanisms you want to employ for providing your own anonymity, like portable Tor, portable Firefox, with anonymity plugins in place, etc. Optimally, we're going to avoid the internet entirely. All right, this brings us to the rules.
These are the rules, whether you pick any level or no level. These are the 8 rules you need to follow. The first of all is don't be your identity.
Rule number 2, do not be your identity.
Number 3, you're going to get rid of all your paper trail.
Number 4, you're going to use cash in all transactions.
Number 5, constantly work on improving your situational awareness.
6 is, of course, blend in, don't stand out.
7 is encrypt everything.
And, of course, 8, pay your taxes.
All right.
Big thanks to Beth and Lydia for their invaluable input. Freak Monkey for the real cool Urbex photographs that are in the background of all of our slides here. And the Shmoo Group for really paving the path, as well as hosting this lovely conference for us to speak at.
We'd be remiss if we don't thank everyone who's come before us and done a lot more research than we have and written more books than we've ever thought about on this topic. And every one of you guys for coming and listening to us talk. We're going to put some more information on this URL here. We'll put a lot of the references to our talks, to things we mentioned in our talk. So come back later.
Hit it. There's nothing there yet.
Tell me how.